Hey folks, Jim Thomas here, Fitness Management and Consulting, and our topic today is what is the future of the gym industry in the United States? Let me walk you through initially some of the things that have happened in the last several weeks and some of the things that are happening as we speak. Okay, and these are in no particular order, but recently, reading, I think it was in clubindustry.com, the CEO of UFit has resigned. The CEO of CrossFit has resigned. 24-hour fitness, they filed for a Chapter 11 restructuring. They've closed over 130 clubs. They've laid off over 8,000 employees. And there's still other clubs that have not opened, so that those numbers could grow. You've got Gold's Gym International. They're in the middle of a bankruptcy filing, and they're at the same time, seeking a potential buyer. A lot happening here. You've got some states that are still not opened. North Carolina has not opened. I think they were planning to, and it got vetoed. New Jersey has still not opened. There was a club in Massachusetts that I guess the city determined that they were not properly following the social distancing guidelines that have been set forth, and they turned their water off. You've got certain counties out in California that they've mandated inside the gym that social distancing is going to be 12 feet, whereas in most cases, across the U.S., it's been 6 feet. And so when you look at this, it's like, wow, what's happening here? What is the future, of the gym industry here? You got some big names, some big companies. You've got some not so big companies, and there's issues and problems out there. What doesn't really get talked about near enough is the success stories, and you don't see these things published really that much, or if at all. And I know from my end, there's numerous clubs that we work with and talk with that are having record sales months, record production months, doing extremely well. So there's a lot of great stories out there, but there are some common denominators here, and this is what I want to talk about a little bit. And this is some of the conversations I get into with independent gym owners when they start asking about, what is the future of the gym industry, okay? And also I might say, there's numerous inquiries on folks looking to acquire clubs, folks who want to open up new gyms. So a lot of activity, a lot of positive activity, you just don't hear about it, okay? And so some things I would talk about here, some of the common denominators and why the future is bright, I think, for the fitness industry, is if you follow certain protocols. Let's talk about just government mandates and getting opened. One of the things that that we have suggested for all of our clients and all the folks that we talk to is whatever your local government is mandating for your reopening, whatever the rules are, do more than what's required. Let's don't do less. Let's don't try to skirt by. Let's do more. We want to give the public, we want to give the local community, we want to give them certainty, we want to give them trust. And the more we do that, the more they're going to have certainty and trust in other areas. Let's don't try to, skirt the rules. Let's follow them, and where we can, let's do more than what's asked of us. And clubs that are doing this, it's proven to work extremely well as far as getting people to come back in because that trust factor is high, the confidence factor is high, and there's high levels of certainty. Let's talk a little bit about, kind of some key performance indicators, just from a dollar and cent standpoint. When you look at P&Ls, a lot of the clubs that are in trouble, I don't get a chance to see all those P&Ls and what they're looking at and how they're doing. But I know for folks that do well, okay, key performance indicators. And again, talking to you independent gym owners, when you're evaluating, your own particular situation, what is your rent? As a percentage to overhead. Now, and I'm looking at what is your rent once it's mature. And let's just, for the sake of maybe this conversation, let's say maturity is 12 months, depending on where you're at in operation. And many of you have been around longer than that. Is I like to see your rent no higher than 20% of your revenues. And in many cases, I'd love to see it down 19, 18, 17, 16, 15%. But let's just say your rent's at 20. I know I get into some of these situations and we're looking at this and the rent maybe is 60%. Well, you're almost dead in the water before you get started here if you're not careful. So, folks that have good rent, good lease situations on their building, big difference maker. You just jump in there and cut yourself a bad deal. It's hard to get out of. I mean, you're kind of in business just to pay the landlord at that point. The second thing I would look at is your payroll cost. And depending on the type operation that you're running, payroll is going to run 36, 42%. And let's just, again, for the sake of this conversation, let's just call payroll, let's call it 40%. So if payroll is at 40%, if your rent, let's just call it 20, there's 60%. And let's say everything else is going to cost you 10%. That's 70% of your revenues. You're in a position now to show a 30% profit margin. And this is where you're trying to get. And what you want to have is, I tell people all the time, the people that are best in this business, they're the folks that are great at plan B. And let's just say your rent is higher than that. Maybe you can do some sublets inside your gym. Maybe you can rent space to other groups, other companies to help bring down, the effective cost of that rent. So, but the key is you want to get that rent in line because your fixed cost is going to be your fixed cost, and it's not going to change too much, whether you got a few hundred members or a few thousand members. So, get that fixed cost set, and that's why that key performance indicator is so important right there. What I love to see also is on your recurring fees, your recurring dues, this recurring revenue, at least 80% of your base operating expense, and really focusing on here's where we need to go. I mean, and you have to know where you're going, right? There's a lot of folks that know that it's not working for them. They're not quite sure why it's not working for them. But get those recurring fees up. Okay, and there's other things we could talk about. Clubs that do a great job at that second sale, whereas they're getting more money, per customer at point of sale. These are all some of the key components here, and a lot of these folks that have struggled and continue to do so, you can a lot of times zero back in on some of these same things. And some of the things we've talked about, in prior videos, is you have to keep your debt manageable. Make sure that the debt that you have, if you have debt, is make sure it's generating your revenue. It's debt that generates your revenue. Don't make it debt that's it's going to cause you to crumble. Because what happens to a lot of organizations, that debt just gets unmanageable and there's nothing they can do about it. And so keep your debt manageable. Keep cash reserves on hand. Make sure you've got at least 1 month cash reserves on hand. Make sure that in the operation of your business, you're creating a community of members here. Okay, you're creating a unique experience, for your customers. It's not simply, hey, here's a great price, or we're going to lease you space. This stuff will run flat after a while. And so, a lot of times when you look at this, the current environment, the current situation, I think you can make a case in many situations that what is currently going on didn't cause any of this. It simply exposed it and accelerated what maybe was going to happen anyway. And so for you folks that are following, key performance indicators, you've got a solid business plan in place, and you stay disciplined to this. I mean, I see big things for the fitness industry, and I'm watching it happen, right here as we speak. And one of the other things that doesn't get talked about a whole lot is, do you have a strong retention plan in place? What kind of retention program do you have? I was doing a webinar not long ago, and there was probably 100 or so gym owners on this, and this was for a legacy brand, if you will. And one of the poll questions on there: do you have a defined retention plan? And none of them did. None of them had a defined retention plan. And get this in place. I mean, this is going to save you a significant amount of money because, your average clubs across the country, I mean, they're losing between 3 and 4% of their membership every month. If you extrapolate that out, you're talking maybe as much as half your membership every year you're losing. I've talked to clubs that have been as high as 75%, 125% on this. And so this is a real issue. You just don't want to sign these folks up and then lose them. You want to get this strategy in place where you can keep these folks. And from my perspective, I mean, the focus I like to have is I like to get that retention down to, or attrition down to about 2%, 2.5% per month. This is a significant savings. Takes a lot of pressure, off your sales team. The other thing that I would talk about on this is, for you owners and for you, for you operators and managers, spending at least half your time, thinking and planning and implementing, sales and marketing programs. The clubs that are doing the best right now, these are the things that you see. Training your staff. What is our commitment to getting our staff trained? What is our commitment to getting ourselves trained? I know when I was owning gyms, I mean, I'd travel all around the country. I was always trying to figure out, well, what are you doing? What are you doing that's so much better than what I'm doing? What are you doing that maybe I can implement in my company? And so, making sure that you're exposing yourself to this kind of education. But there's an awful lot out there. I see big things, for the industry. And I think the things that we're seeing now, I think it's simply things that we were going to see anyway. We're just seeing them a lot more quickly. And just because of circumstances, maybe a little heightened awareness on it. But, there's big things out there. I'd love to hear your comments. What do you see? What are your thoughts on the industry? What's working well for you? Place it in the comments below. If you need help with this, click the link below. We've got a free strategy session for you. It's no cost, no obligation, 45 minutes. And, in some cases, that may be all you need, to help get your business back on track. And if you enjoy the content that I bring to you, I appreciate it. Give some consideration to hitting the subscribe button, hitting the like button. It helps me expand my audience, helps me reach more people, and hopefully help them, gain some certainty in how they run their business. Again, my name's Jim Thomas. Hope you have a great day.